Hi, hello there. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Tabitha Gabrielle, and today I'm going to be giving you the rundown of 8 books that I read between July and October. Am I severely behind in this because it's now the end of November? Yes, I am. But, you know, I feel like I'm behind in all other areas of my life.
So what's new, honestly?
I would like to apologize if my hair looks a little bit crazy. I credit the wind. I'm out here in this beautiful naturescape, so hopefully it's somewhat enjoyable for you. I might be doing more videos up here because it's just so peaceful and so serene. The first book that I'm going to talk about today is Everything Sad is Untrue by Daniel Nayeri. And I believe I'm saying his last name right. I'm so sorry if I'm not. So I very much loved the poetic writing style of this book. It is an autobiography kind of recapping the life of an immigrant child. And this child goes from Iran, I believe, to Oklahoma. Culture shock, to say the least. But it's basically talking about his life and growing up as an immigrant in rural Oklahoma. And it's like through this book, he's paying homage to his history and his roots, but then he's also crediting who he is today to, you know, growing up in Oklahoma. And so he's like intertwining those worlds, and I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful story. I loved learning about some of the history of his homeland through the way that he wrote about it. It was like he kept doing these little flashbacks, and like his first memory of his grandfather is wild. That is a wild time. But it's like he weaves his own history, and then he also weaves the history of the culture. And then he also weaves in like what he learned living in the United States in Oklahoma as a child. And it's just, I don't know, it's very unique and it's very interesting, and I loved his writing style. His writing style is poetic and beautiful and almost musical in quality, if that makes sense. I would highly recommend. It's free on Kindle Unlimited. Technically on Goodreads I gave it 5 stars, but I'm not gonna like attach a star rating to someone's personal life story, you know. But yes, I would call it great. I would say yes, I do recommend it. Definitely read it. It's fantastic. Moving on to book 2 for this video, it is Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis by J.D. Vance. And before you click off this video, I promise that this is the last memoir. This is the only political book that is on this. He wrote it before he was running for any kind of political office. So I know that everyone is still like recovering from the election season here like earlier this month. So don't panic. I'm not going to get into like the politics of it. I'm just going to talk about the book and like his childhood life story and how it led him to who he is today. I listened to this partially on audiobook as well. And I will say that if you do venture into reading this or listening to this, do be aware that there is language, because he does not sugarcoat the culture which he came from. It's a rough lifestyle. It's a rough culture. The people within are very tough and very gritty, and that very much comes across in this book, and that includes in the language. And a few years ago, I did watch the Netflix version of his life, which is also really good. I haven't watched it in a few years, but it is really good, but also it does have the language and everything, so it's not sugarcoating anything, but it is really, really good. And it's really interesting to know where someone like him came from, like being where he is today especially. I think that it's really interesting to have that backstory and have that insight on like how he grew up, because it wasn't pretty. It wasn't privileged. Again, I try not to associate a star rating with someone's personal life story, but I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. Moving on, the third book that I read was Skyward by Sanderson. I feel like I've heard quite a few other fellow booktubers talk about this book and rate it very highly. So I went into it with high expectations. I will say I soft DNF'd this probably last year sometime because I read the first couple of pages and it did not grab my interest, and so I just put it down. But then everybody started talking so highly of it, and I was like, well, maybe I'll revisit it. So I did. Just to kind of break down what it's about. So on this futuristic planet called Detritus, there are these people that live there, and they live there because like years before, their ancestors crash landed their spaceship onto this planet, And they've now been living there. They're kind of trapped because once they crash landed there, whenever they tried to leave, aliens would kill them. Like, they have the technology to fly out, but then they don't have the numbers to actually fight off the aliens to get out the rest of the way, if you know what I mean. So Spence's people, who are humans, have decided to just dig into this planet and make it their home. However, there are still pilots in the DDF, and I don't remember what the DDF stands for. I know they do important, like, military flying, piloting type stuff. As a child, Spencer watches her father get shot out of the sky by their own people because he did something that labeled him a coward and a deserter. And so they shot him out of the sky. And his little child watched that happen and was traumatized for the rest of her life. When Spence is older, she decides that she's going to join the DDF herself and become a pilot. She's going to change the world, you know. And so anyway, you follow her through her military flight school. You meet a lovely cast of side characters, some of whom you love, some of whom you don't love so much. There's like a slight little hint of romance in this book too, which I really enjoyed, and I really shipped the two characters, and they're kind of very unlikely. You wouldn't expect it, but I enjoyed it. Throughout her time in her military flight school, she is basically labeled the same way as her father multiple times. And so she's having to overcome that and also come to terms with the fact that, you know, her father did do something cowardly, that was perceived as cowardly anyway. And, you know, coming to terms with that fact, and coming to terms with the fact that she's now working for the people that shot down her father, you know. It is political in a way, but I believe the second book, which I'll talk about at the very end of this video, is more political, if that makes sense. Because in this book, you're really only seeing two races. You're seeing the human race and then the Krell, which are the alien race that's kind of keeping them trapped on the planet. I don't remember how it ended, if I'm being honest, but I do remember that there was a really nice segue into the second book. And like I said, I'll talk about that more at the end because I read a few other books in between Skyward and the second book, which is Starlight or Starsight. I read a few books in between Skyward and Starsight, so I'm going to talk about those first, but I'll get to Starsight at the end. Anyway, I rated this book 5 stars. It was great. It was lovely. The fourth book on this list is called The First Girl Child by Amy Harmon and Rob Shapiro. This book, I don't even know how I found it. I've read one other Amy Harmon book, and I'm going to be honest, it wasn't my favorite. I read A Girl Called Samson by Amy Harmon, and it was okay, but it was not my favorite by any means. But this book was her, like, redemption arc, because this book was great. Let me set the setting for you, okay? It's a Viking fantasy. Think like Braveheart, but there's also like fantasy elements too. So you have multiple clans, okay? Each clan has a chieftain, right? So the shield maiden daughter of one of these clan chieftains gets pregnant by the son of another clan chieftain. You following? Okay, so after the son of this clan chieftain finds out that this girl is pregnant by him, he's like,
oh, you know what? I'm gonna go find somebody else to be with.
And kind of abandons her. And you know what that was like back then, like left ruined, basically. And so anyway, she has the most feminine rage response possible. So on her grisly deathbed, where she just gave birth outside, right, she decides to curse the entire kingdom and name her infant son as the only savior. Along comes her brother, who the brother and the sister were very close. And the brother finds this child next to his bloody sister, because she just went off in the wilderness and had this child, right? And cursed the land at the same time, because why wouldn't you? Her brother, the child's uncle, decides to raise him. But for the political safety of the child, he doesn't tell anyone who the child is. He's just like,
oh, I found this child out in the wilderness, you know.
The brother of the sister that cursed the entire land. I don't remember names, that's why I'm not saying anybody's names. They kind of all have weird names. The main character, who is the son, the woman's son, who is the savior of the land or whatever. His name is Bear. I remember that. It's Bayr, Bear. So the uncle takes Bear home. And home for the uncle is a temple, because he's some kind of like a monk or something. Like, they're not allowed to get married and stuff. And there's like all of this extra political drama, because then as Bear grows, the uncle is realizing, wow, there is actually something to this child. Like, he's over here climbing trees when he's not even 2. Like, he's super strong for his age. And so anyway, as he gets older, you know, he's having his like teen moment where he's like the star of the football team, except, you know, they're like throwing javelins and stuff. So anyway, he's like the star. Everybody loves him. And then there's like this whole drama where he ends up meeting his real dad, but he doesn't know that it's his dad, and the dad doesn't know that it's him, but the uncle knows everything. That's the whole entertainment of this story, is that the uncle knows everything, knows the full story, but never tells anything. But the way things end up playing out, it all gets revealed anyway. It gets revealed in the most dramatic way possible. There's like all of the political drama, which, you know, I love. There's the magical element of it too, which is like but it's a fantasy. It's a Viking fantasy. So yeah, there are like runes and blood curses and weird stuff like that, but it adds so much to the story, and I loved it. Oh, I failed to mention what the curse was. That's the whole title of the book, right? So Bear's mom, whenever she cursed the entire land, her curse was basically that no girl children were ever going to be born in the land. Therefore, like, effectively killing off the entire everybody, right? Over time, everybody's going to die without some girls in there, right? So she's like, no girl children will be born to anyone in this land. And then she goes, and then she dies. And after naming her infant son Savior. Basically, how it ends up unfolding and all of the drama that ends up happening and ensuing and the battle scenes and stuff. Oh, it's great. It's great. There is one, I think, like semi-spicy scene. I kind of skipped through it in the audiobook, so I really don't remember much of it. It didn't bother me because I just skipped through it. My final rating for this book was 5 stars. It was great. I wrote a whole novel as a review for this book, so here's that. You can pause to read if you want. The 5th book on this list today is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy, and I think that's how you say his last name. Very sorry if it's not. This is a very calming, cute story, and the little illustrations are very organic looking and very sweet. It just looks like you're stumbling across someone's sketchbook notepad thing and just seeing all these little scribbles of drawings. It's got a very calming effect to it, though, I have to say. I think anyone of any age can get something out of it. It's this really cutesy book kind of highlighting the importance and the meaning of friendships and how different personality types interact with different friends and how different personality types need other types of people as friends to kind of like build each other up. And like, I don't know, it's just the construction of friendship within this book was so sweet and so cute. And I loved how they all like loved and supported each other. The boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse, they all supported each other in different ways. They all had different life experiences and offered different advice for different things, because all of those little differences are what makes friendship so beautiful. And that's what I got out of this book. I also watched the little like 34-minute animated version, and I cried 3 times. It's very cute. It's very sweet. I didn't cry because it was sad. I cried because it was just, it hit deep, you know? It was sweet. Would recommend. I don't remember what I rated it. I think it was like 4 or something like that. The 6th book on this list. Arguably one of my favorite books of the year. One of my most anticipated books of the year as well was Reckless by Lauren Roberts. So this is the sequel to Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Okay, so this book opens with a kind of cat and mouse game between our 2 main characters, Kai and Peyton. Okay, so Peyton, after wreaking absolute havoc in the kingdom of Ilia, has run and fled to a kingdom door, which is a neighboring kingdom. And so Kai and a group of his little enforcer people have chased her down, and they're kind of on the hunt for her in Dor. Almost catch each other multiple times, and ultimately Kai ends up finding her doing cage fights in Dor, okay? Because of course Peyton would be found doing cage fights in Dor. Where else would she be found, honestly? So their cat and mouse game ends when Kai decides that it would be a good idea to chain themselves together. So he puts one side of the chain on Peyton's leg and the other side on his leg and throws away the key, basically, and he's like,
well, you're coming with me. You're coming with me whether you want to or not.
Because back in Aaliyah, Kit's the king now, and Kit is very angry, somewhat understandably, about the havoc that Peyton wreaked on his kingdom. So he's, sent Kai off, and he's like,
bring her back to me. I want her alive, though.
And Kai's like,
all right.
And of course, Kai's having all of these internal struggles because, of course, he did love Peyton, but now she's done all this and she betrayed him and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, they're tied together now, and they're like, Peyton is being an absolute thorn in Kai's side, and Kai is just being just a thorn in her side, and they're just like all these mental jabs and the banter. Bro, the banter. I don't think anybody writes banter as good as Lauren Roberts. Like, she is the queen of banter writing. It was great. And basically throughout their time tied together, like journeying back through, Dor, they encounter all of these crazy obstacles that they end up having to overcome together, and they have to work together, and they end up falling in love again, and blah, 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 blah. But it's so cute. It is so cute. You have to read it, okay? You have to read it. And then the end, it's not confirmed, but I think that at the end, one of the characters loses their mind, okay? Not Kai or Peyton, one of the side characters. And I don't know what to expect with the third book that's coming out in 2025. That is currently my most anticipated book for 2025 because I have to know what's happening. I will love this book and this series till the day I die. 5 stars. The 7th book on this list is Powerful by Lauren Roberts. So this novella is about Adina, who is Peyton's best friend and kind of a side character in the first book, Powerless. And you never get any chapters from her perspective in Powerless, so this book is kind of her perspective and all of her little side quests that she was doing while Peyton was in the arena wreaking havoc on the kingdom of Aaliyah, okay? Adina is a character that is somewhat near and dear to my heart because I very much relate to her. I feel like we're very similar in the realm of personality, and it just makes the end of the book even more tragic and even more sad because I'm like, just like her general personality and the way that she viewed the world was very similar to my own personal view of the world. And she's just like the most wholesome character ever. It's not fair. Don't read this book if you don't want to cry, because you will cry. I mean, semi-spoiler, but if you've read Powerless, you know what happens. I really loved her as a character, obviously. I really loved her love interest, too, who is the definition of scary boyfriend energy, but their personalities complemented each other so well, and I really loved I loved him. And I know that he's kind of controversial. Some of the people that I've heard talk about this book have not liked him, but I liked him. I thought they were a really good pair for each other. And I'm low-key when are we going to find out the rest of what happens with Mac? Are we ever going to find out? I want to know. He better have, his happy ending too, because what the heck, Lauren? What the heck? I loved this book. I know some people weren't a fan of the language within this book, but it doesn't bother me. I didn't mind. And then I think that there's a few makeout scenes, but nothing that I would say isn't comparable to what was in Powerless or Reckless. So anyway, yeah, be aware of that. But I would definitely recommend this book, and I cried at the end. I was sitting by myself at the end when I was reading it, and I just sat there and I cried, and I stared at the wall for a few minutes before recovering. So yeah, and I think it's mainly just because she didn't understand. She didn't know what was going on, and it was just so unfair. Anyway, I'm gonna make myself sad if I keep talking about it, so I'm gonna move on. The very last book that I'm going to be talking about today is Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. This is the sequel to Skyward, and I don't know if I was in a reading slump or what was going on with me when I read this book, but I had the hardest time slogging through it, if I'm being honest. And I even had the audiobook. I don't know if it was just where I was at in life at the time or what, but it was not an easy reading experience for me, if that makes sense. I don't know. There is a lot more world in this one because the main setting in the first book, Skyward, is Detritus, which is their planet. But in this one, Spencer is a pilot, and she ends up going AWOL and becoming a spy and going off to these other alien planets and alien kingdoms and pretending to be, someone of another race. She's like infiltrating them and like learning more about them. And it's interesting, like the concept sounds interesting as I'm talking about it, so I have no idea why I had such a hard time slogging through it, but I rated it 3 stars, which is pretty low for me. I will say I was very intrigued by the last, probably 4th of this book, because a very lovable character ends up dying, but it all ends up being okay. Like, I'm happy about it. It all ends up being okay. And I know that makes no sense, but if you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. My favorite characters in this were Hesho, which is like a little fox alien guy, and he's so cute, and I love his little race, and I forgot what they're called, but they're like little fox gerbil things. The picture that I have in my head is very cute, okay? It's like, I'm not afraid at all, because they're so cute. But, they're driving spaceships and like shooting things up, so I guess they're a little scary. And then, of course, Mbot. Mbot is a lovable character. And then Doomslug gets more focus in this too. Like I said in the first one, the book has a very lovely, lovable cast of side characters. The end of this book ended on a cliffhanger, if I remember correctly, but I have not felt the pull to pick up the 3rd one yet. I'm sure I will eventually, but I think it's just because I was in a terrible reading slump whenever I first read this book, and I am just not in any hurry to revisit the world, unfortunately. The main plot of this book is that Spencer is infiltrating these alien races and the alien spaces, pretending to be one of the other alien races, and kind of hearing the hatred that they have for humans and how, they think that humans are terrible, and there actually is a human that works for them, but she's like brainwashed into thinking that her race is the worst and like the most terrible scum of the earth ever. And so that's kind of the view that they all have of humans. At the end, it is revealed. They find out that she is a human. And there are mixed feelings about it from the cast of side characters. I don't remember much about it, but I remember it ended on a cliffhanger. So anyway, yeah. Hopefully this video was somewhat entertaining for you. Hopefully the background wasn't too distracting. I find it very peaceful, so hopefully you think the same. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever other time of day it is for you. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye. If you're still watching this, comment one of your favorite books from between July to October. I would love to hear it. So, yeah, that's all I have for you today. Bye-bye.